working on setting up the workshop, then do reach out via the Slack channel and ask the TA, because we're really down to just help. Our TAs will be down to help you out and basically get you up to speed on the pre-workshop notes. And other than that, let's get started. So today we're doing all about APIs using an Express backend and a MongoDB database. And just a disclaimer that this workshop will be recorded and shared on the nwPlus YouTube channel. And of course, we won't be recording anyone's video except for pretty much mine or any sound if you guys ask any questions or anything, which will be part of the recording. Another disclaimer is that this workshop covers a lot of material actually relatively quickly. So if you're behind at any point, don't hesitate to reach out, because our TAs are there for you, and you can just leave a message in the Slack channel all about APIs, or you can reference this nice workshop companion guide that basically simplifies the entire process and is essentially everything on the slide. So cool. And then, so yeah, here's another link to the workshop handbook and resources, because again, everything's on there. Just go to the workshop companion notes or the pre-workshop or the workshop info, which has like everything. They are all linked to each other, so you won't get lost. And the timeline, again, is 2 hours. We will just briefly go over an introduction. We'll go over the prerequisites, a quick overview of the theory, and then we will dive into the code, such as setting up the backend with Express from scratch. We'll connect it to our MongoDB database, and then we'll create some server endpoints so we can do like create, read, update, delete operations. And finally, we'll do some testing with some Insomnia, which is just an application that we use for testing. So here's a quick introduction. So hello, everybody. I'm Ben. I'm a 4th year computer science major at UBC. And I'm actually on the sponsorship team at nwPlus. And I was actually surprisingly a former biochemist. So I do have a degree in biochemistry. And I would like to thank and like introduce our lovely TAs, Daniel, Jill, and Jenny, who will be helping out, answer your questions, whatnot, doing breakout rooms. And of course, our co-presidents, Allison and Ann, who will be also helping us out today. Our objectives today will be basically be able to set up an Express server from scratch. You'll be able to connect your backend server to the MongoDB database. You'll be able to perform CRUD operations to the database, and then it will be essentially a simple API that you could use to then test that database and do operations on it. And we'll be testing it with Insomnia. So at nwPlus, we're a hackathon club, and we've been like powering some of the largest hackathons in the Pacific Northwest, and we've been empowering thousands of hackers worldwide. So we actually have a hackathon coming up on December 5th to 6th called HackCamp, and you probably might have known that we also done nwHacks and cmd-f. So registration is still live, so feel free to just hit that registration button and go join. It's free, might as well if you're bored during the weekend. And let's just jump into prereqs. So this workshop is intermediate in nature, so you should probably have some JavaScript experience. Hopefully you have Node installed. I would recommend IDE called VS Code. That's really good. Hopefully you have some basic understanding of command line commands, but that's fine. Otherwise, you can just follow the instructions and you should be fine. Hopefully you have a GitHub account so that we can easily clone the repository. And of course, you get the starter code from this repo here, which is just git clone and then basically a nice URL to my GitHub. And then we have the REST client. Make sure install this Insomnia. You installed Insomnia core. I didn't know that Insomnia had a new one, but like you don't need the design one. Just install the core, and yeah, and just follow the instructions to set up the MongoDB server. That would be pretty much optional because we don't want our dummy server to be pinged by a lot of people. But otherwise, if you haven't set it up, that's fine too. You can just use our dummy server. So here's again another workshop handbook slide. So of course, here are the resources if you need them. And let's jump right into the content now. So overview. So what is a backend? So like this meme displays, like usually a front end is what the front end user sees. And then the backend would be basically the server side. There's a portion that the end user doesn't really see of a website or an application. In the backend, we focus on the functionality and the logic powering the application. And we usually could refer to it as like a data access layer. So another cool fact about the backend is that it could also be abstract, so you don't have to implement it. You could probably use something like Firebase, which is like a backend as a service. And we'll just go into the backend fundamentals. So yep, like front end, just like before, it's client side, and it's what happens in the browser, and it's what end users see and interact with. It's also called the presentation layer. The backend happens on the server, of course, or on the site, on the cloud, and communicates with like your database, and of course, data access layer to drive that point home. And some of the basic components of the backend consist like a server. The database could be attached to the backend. You'll need the middleware. So the middleware is like essentially like your plumbing that like allows your backend components to like, communicate. You can use your programming language and frameworks, which basically just what you'll be using to build the backend. And of course, the API, which is the application programming interface. So what's a client versus a server? So we're going pretty quickly here, but of course, if you have any questions, always just ask in the Slack. So for server side, it's just basically everything that happens on the server instead of the client. So like business logic, for example, like the interaction with your database, authentication, or even push notifications. And then there's client side, which is everything in the web app that is displayed or takes place on the client or on the end user's device. And also it's like basically, of course, the front end. So any interactions, button clicks, whatever you do directly on your user's browser. So why are we using Node? Why are we using Express? And what is an API? We're using Node because it's pretty simple to get started. It's open source. It uses JavaScript. And it also is pretty memory efficient, which is pretty awesome. And we're using Express as well, which is a relatively minimalist web framework for Node. And it's pretty easy to get started as well. Just call Express function and you pretty much have most of it. And it unlocks and gives you access to like basically a higher level API to use. And then finally, what is an API? I hinted about this a bit before, but essentially it is a set of rules that allows programs to communicate. So like you probably heard about like REST API or RESTful API. So REST is representational state transfer, which determines how the API will specifically look like. So a set of rules that developers will follow when they create their API. So some of those rules would be like, in order to obtain like a specific piece of data or like a resource, you would have to link it to a specific URL. So and then each URL would be called a request, and then the data sent back is called a response. And then there's the components of a networking request. So a request consists of 4 main components. There's the endpoint, which is basically your request URL, like I mentioned before. It is the address of the resource you are requesting. You'll have in your endpoint, you also have like a route, which is the name that you would use to access the endpoints used in the URL. And then, of course, you'll have multiple endpoints associated with it. You can also have multiple endpoints associated with it, which also depends on like the HTTP verb. So HTTP verb would basically be like one of the methods you see in the next bullet point. So you see the get request, post request, put request, and delete request. So those are all HTTP verbs. They're essentially what you're doing to like either request, like what you want to do. Like a get request, for example, would be like getting data. A post would be you're posting data. Delete, obviously. And then you'll have header, which is related to the message content, and you can just provide context about your request. And then the data, which is just commonly just like a JSON object or array for like, for example, if you want to post something, what are you posting? So it's usually like an object. And then we'll just quickly go over this slide, which is the HTTP methods that we will be going over. What is relevant for us is just the get request, the post request, and the put request, as well as the delete request. Those are the 4 that we will be doing today. Because we want to do the CRUD operations, which is just create, read, update, and delete. And then for the database, we will be using MongoDB. Alternative databases would be like MySQL, Postgres, SQLite. There's plenty of databases out there. We chose MongoDB because it's NoSQL. It's pretty simple to get started. You just make a free account, free cluster, and then you pretty much just upload the document there. There are many advantages of MongoDB. I don't want to go over all of them, but if you're still not convinced, you could always click this link on the bottom here, which is basically MongoDB's website, which basically says why you want to use MongoDB, and they have better reasons than I do. So yeah, you should probably click that link if you're really interested. And of course, we'll be using Goose, which is object document mapping library for MongoDB and Node.js. So it manages the relationships between the data and provides the schema validation, and is used to translate between objects in code and representations of those objects in our MongoDB database. So yeah, that was a mouthful. So if you have any questions, of course, just ask in the Slack, and the TA will help you out. And so let's just dive directly into the code. So the first part of this workshop will be setting up the backend, which is like a code along. And then we will have the creating the endpoints, which is more like a fill in the blank kind of thing. So yeah, let's get started with the backend. So I'm going to pull up a brand new empty file here. So as you can see, it's literally empty. There's nothing in this folder. So this is an empty folder. And then we'll just follow the steps one by one. So let me just expand this window so you can probably see the code when I actually do it. Here we go. So the first step is to download the starter code from this nice github.com profile. So I can't copy paste it here, so I will have to type it into my browser. So let me just type it real quickly and pull that up.
You could escape presentation mode and then.
Nah, it's fine. I have tabs on the top. So yeah, here it is. It's a nice repo. So the master would be what we want to choose, because if you're bored, you can also look at the solution, or like after the workshop, look at the solution. But for now, we're using the master, which is the starter code. We'll copy paste this nice URL. And then let's just go to a terminal. So in VS Code, there's this cool thing called like new terminal. So if I'm lazy and I don't want to go to the actual my Windows terminal, then I can just do that. And then you would do git clone and git clone this repository. So great, we cloned it. So we see this workshop here. So now is the first CL command line. We use command line CLI command. So command, this means change directory, CD, and then we want to change into the backend workshop. So now we're inside this folder here. Perfect. And then if we do ls, we can actually see everything in the backend. So you can see the git ignores. So that means we're on the right branch. If we do git branch, we should see that we're on the master branch. Perfect. So now what do? We have to install the dependencies, and yeah. So first, to install the dependencies, you want to cd into the backend folder. So let's just cd into the backend folder. Oh no, I can't spell today. Okay, we're in the backend folder now. So we're in here, and then we want to do npm install, which is just to get all our dependencies. Ah, beautiful. I typed n instead. There we go. And while we wait. All right, so now we have this nice like server. A high vulnerability, you could probably ignore that. It's just a dependency update because I haven't updated dependency in a while. So after doing npm install, if you ever want to run a server, you can just type nomon server in the backend folder. So you just type nomon server here. But for now, we don't have a server. So if we go to the server.js file, we have literally nothing here. We have a bunch of comments, which don't really help in regards to the actual server. So let's go back to the slide now. So now let's just quickly add our dependencies. So to add our dependencies, we want to get these three dependencies particularly. So we want the Express, we want the course, and we want the Mongoose. And then of course we want the .env, .env, so for our environment variable afterwards. So let's just go here. There's also instructions here if you ever forget. So how to start. So first thing we do is dependencies. So I'll just put it over here. I'll do a dependency comment, dependencies, I can't spell. And then we'll just quickly do const. We want all of these dependencies on the side here, on the side of the screen. Express equals require, express. Of course, if you're faster, you can probably just copy paste it. I should have copy pasted, but I restarted. So we're gonna start typing. Got all these dependencies here. Then, of course, we want the .env.
What did you do?
And .com. So now we have the dependencies. Perfect. The next thing you want to do is you want to create your Express app. So to create an Express app, you would want to call it an Express function. So we're using Express because you can literally just call this function to create an Express app. So it simplifies your life like significantly. So to do so, we can just define a variable called application. We'll call our Express function. And then you want to define a port because the port will be what we will be using for our web server to listen on. So in this case, we'll want to use either the environmental port if we had one already running or 5000. So port equals process.env.port or 5000. Simple or statement right there. Cool. And then the third step would be set up the middleware. So the middleware is we're using cores for our middleware. And Express.json, we'll have to use something called Express.json, which is a method built in to Express to recognize incoming request objects as JSON objects. So we could just quickly make our app, our Express app, use the cores. So we just put cores function, pop a cores function in there, and then we just do app.use Express.json. Cool. Then we can move on to the next slide. If I'm going too fast, feel free to ask the question in the Slack channel or do a breakout room or look at the companion notes. And then so a quick look at Express server. We're still looking at our Express server. We want to test the server to make sure it actually works. So to do so, we would want to listen to our application. And then like basically when we run it, we'll just print this nice message essentially. So we'll just go to the bottom here. So in order to confirm it, let's just do app.listen port, and then we'll make another nice function here, arrow function, and we do console.log, and then we could just do like server is running port. We'll do like $signs, so we could insert like variables in there. Well, I think I messed up this one. That should be like the nice weird comma, like after the, like before the 1 on your keyboard. There we go. Have the port. And then now let's just hope that it works. So we could run the server with nomon server. So we go to our console here, nomon server. It should work. Perfect. So it works. So you can see that this nice message is running on port 5000. So we know that our server works. So now let's just like close the server for now. So we could just do Control-C. If you're on Mac OS, then it's like that nice like arrow up arrow thingy with C. It's not actually like the you don't have control. Okay, so now let's connect to the MongoDB database. So to do so, we have to make sure that you have like all your credentials. So this is where we want the .env. So in this file here, you can see a .env. Your .env is essentially a file that you would not commit to GitHub because that would basically contain all your credentials to access your MongoDB database or whatever whatever other application you want to have sensitive information for. So let's create that real quickly. So let's see. So we will create it in this backend folder. So we'll just create a new file, .env, and then you will be copy pasting the credentials. So in your env, what we're doing is we are going to copy paste this atlas URI. It's a constant, and then it'll contain like this nice like access token. So of course, this access token has our like the name and password and everything. Since we already want to do that, I am going to copy paste that from the slides directly. You can find the same thing on the companion notes, or you can use your, at this point, like if this is a dummy server permission, so you have your own and you would like to use your own, feel free to copy paste your own into the env, into the file, essentially. Okay, so let me quickly go here onto my other screen and copy paste this. Okay, there we go. I copy pasted my .env file. Perfect. And then now that we have the env file, we can move on to the next step. Okay, so now we want to create a variable to call URI to store it. So this would be to do create a variable number 2. So we already finished to do number 1, which was create an env file to store the MongoDB credentials. And then the URI holds the credentials to access the MongoDB database, which we obtained from the MongoDB dashboard. And of course, those actual credentials are stored in the .env file that we will create ourselves in the backend. One thing that you guys should probably do if you have GitHub is you should probably put .env here so that it's in your git ignore folder, so you're not committing it. So GitHub ignores when you do git add, you stage the changes, and you get ready to commit it. It does not commit your changes of this specific file. Of course, you also don't want to commit node modules, so don't put node module. Put node modules in this file as well. So we have that .env file done. So now let's quickly create the variable to access that information right here. So to do so, we would do const URI equals process.n.atlas URI. Why are we doing atlas URI? That is the variable that we called our .env file after right here. So we're just calling that variable. And then we already added our git ignore. So now we can just fix depreciation warnings and connect the URL to Mongoose. So that would be number 3, connecting to the MongoDB database. So we want to go to our Mongoose ODM and then connect it. So we would pass in our URI, and then we would pass in these specific properties. Honestly, these properties, you could probably find documentation on the MongoDB website on specifically why we need these, but we're adding them so that we don't get the depreciation warnings because there's always news updates, and then we have to keep track of those new depreciation warnings and update our code accordingly. There we go. So we have that. And then of course, we need to make sure we define our connection. This is so we can check that we're actually connected to the MongoDB database afterwards. So it's kind of similar to the Express listen snippet of code before. And then finally, we want to confirm the connection and output the success message if we are connected successfully. So let's quickly do that. So we have our connection variable that we just did. We did .once. And then we'll have an open command and an open bracket arrow function. And then we'll just do a console.log. I'm lazy to type, so I'm just going to do MongoDB database success. Make it more complex, whatever, doesn't matter. And we have a successful, like a success message here. And then finally, we want to mount the middleware for the routes. Do we want to mount the middleware for the routes right now? We probably don't. We'll just test out the server first. So let's just do no mount server. And then there we go, MongoDB success. So that means that we have successfully created a server, an Express server. We have successfully connected our MongoDB database to our Express server. So we have our bare bones Express server and MongoDB hooked up already. Perfect. So now we have to do like a few more parts, of course. Number 5, so that is to mount and bid the middleware for the route served by the user router. So for our routes using we're going to be making a user schema. And then, so to access that user schema, you'll have to append like /users to the URL. So that means that like for our URL, since we're using localhost 5000 is the port, we'll just append the users /users to the URL at the end, and we can access the users. So to do that, we need to mount the middleware. So to do so, we'll do app.use /users, and then user router. So user router is not defined yet, so we have to actually define that up all the way in here. Okay, so let me quickly just see real quickly. Okay, so like right here, we want to define a route. So to define a route, so that we can use it, we would have to do router equals require. And then we're basically, if you know this, inside our file, we have this cool thing called a user route. inside a routes folder called users.js. Wow, I added that to simplify your life a little bit. So we'll just go access that. Routes and then users. Perfect. So now we have the routes. Our app is still crashing, of course, because if we jump into the user route now, which is what we're requiring, it is basically it is basically fill in a blank. So this code is broken. So that's why we want to fix it. And that's what we will be doing next to essentially work on the routes and fix up whatever issues and make sure everything works. Cool. And of course, if you have any questions, make sure that you are asking in the chat. Not in the chat, in the Slack channel.
We're also doing a speed check in the Slack channel, so you can react various emojis to let us know if we're going too slow, just right, or too fast, and we'll make sure to communicate that to Ben.
Yep.
Right now we're at about just right or a little bit too fast.
Okay, sounds good.
And make sure to ask your questions there for everyone to see as well. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thanks for cooperation, everybody. Make sure you vote so that, okay, so it is too fast.
Okay.
We are going, okay, I will go a bit slower. And of course, if you guys have any questions, make sure you do take advantage of the TA office hours or TA like breakout rooms. They will help you. Also, like if you need some time to catch up, make sure you look at the companion notes. There are multiple sections in those companion notes / workshop guide handbook that basically allows you to copy paste. It has basically the same code as the answer sheet. It has the full explanation. So feel free to catch up that way. So I'll just give everybody about 30 seconds before I'll jump into this user model. The next few sections aren't going to be that bad because it is essentially, we already got the hard part out of the way. The hard part was just coding the Express server from scratch, which was the most time consuming. But now it's going to be much lighter in terms of workload. We will just be working on fixing the broken and missing aspects of each route and discussing what those routes are for. Okay, so I am going to go to the next part now. So defining your user model. So in MongoDB, we want to create a user schema that will represent a single user. The single user object will have two attributes. So it'll have a user age and it'll have a username. So how do we do that? So we have two to-dos. Let's go to our code. I'm going to full screen it to make our life a little bit easier. And then let's just jump into the models. So go to the models, go to user.model.js. And then, so your task now is to add an additional attribute representing the user age. And then you can set the appropriate data type for the age, which is basically a number. So how would you do that? There's a comment here that you can just add it in once you're ready. I'll give everybody around a minute to add this real quickly. Answers are on the slide afterwards, but we will go over it anyways. So this is just a simple user schema where we are requiring the Mongoose module, of course, and then we will define a schema using the built-in Mongoose.schema. And then we will define our user schema by basically instantiating a new schema object. And then inside that schema object is just our nice JSON of specifically every field that we want as part of our object or user object. So our object has a username, and now we also need an age. So how do we do that? So, okay, I don't know if that's 2 minutes, but hopefully everybody has gotten a chance or is still catching up a little bit to just, so how do you do that? Just add another object. We already know the type is a number, so let's just put number. Cool, and then we're done. We have added this nice schema here. And I gotta find the appropriate slide. So if you just look at the answer here, it's the same thing. You just add the age with the appropriate data type here, and then just add the number right there. So we have completed our user schema of the two attributes that we want representing that specific user. And of course, we have to make sure that we have to export it as well. So one thing you might overlook is we define a user that uses this model, and then we export it so that we can use it later in our routes to access the user. There we go. Oops. Oh, that's the wrong slide. There we go. Okay, so I'll give everybody a 10-minute break right now. And in these 10 minutes, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you're catching up, feel free to catch up. Make sure you ask questions in the Slack. Make sure you do some breakout rooms. I apologize if I went a little bit too fast. Everyone had a nice 5-minute break, got some water, stay hydrated, went to the washroom, whatever. Okay, so we will be quickly just reviewing what we just did for like the routes real quickly, and then we will jump directly into the API testing since we have a little bit of time. So let's just quickly go back a few slides and just do a very quick run over of the routes. So I'm just gonna quickly go backwards a little bit. So after the break, we'll just do a quick review of the creating server endpoints. So we create the routes for the user objects. And of course, we want to navigate to that users.js. Each route, of course, was defined by HTTP requests so that we can do a desired CRUD operation, like the add user, delete user, update, or read. So of course, we had to define the user route variable from Express. So we have to define a user variable, make a user a schema we created in the previous step. We have to create a routes, and then we export the router. So quick look at the code again. So in our routes code, so users.js is in the routes folder, of course. We define a routes variable. We define our users variable, which is from the model that we specifically created the last few slides ago, maybe like 30 minutes ago. And then we would go through basically the routes. So we would add all our custom routes here. So get requests, post requests, delete requests, and then we would just make sure that all these router files are exported to the router. So this is where, like, you see this router, that was where we defined it in our server so that we could basically connect it. So the user router, user.routes, and then the user router here. But yeah, we have to always make sure to export it, or else like we can't really use it. And then a quick review from everything, each request from a high level. So the get request is just, of course, just getting something from the database. So in this get request, we're getting every single get request that we can find from. So every single user existing in your database. We could do that by just doing get requests /users, and then we just return all the users after we find them. And then, of course, we do the exercises. So the first exercise was just getting a single user based off the MongoDB ID that we established, and where the :ID variable is actually a pre-generated ID that is already part of MongoDB, so you don't define it yourself, and use that to access a specific user ID and get that information from that one single user based off the ID with the user.findById method that's built in. And then, of course, we have the post1 exercise, which was just posting something to our database. So if we want to create something, we didn't have a user, we have user 1 in the database, but we want to create a user 2 into the database, then we would do a post request where we will basically add that user to our database. So we could define a route called http localhost 5000 user/add. Of course, /add can change depending on whatever you name this specific route in your route, specifically in your route code. So in your router.post, so we post it, and then we have to define the username because we're creating a new instance of that username, and then we have an age, which is basically like optional. So if they already have an age, or then we use it. Otherwise, we just set it to default 0, and then we create a new user object. And then this would be where we would put the user, we will follow the user schema that we defined previously based off our MongoDB schema that we defined in our models, in your models.users folder, I believe. And of course, we would have to follow that format, so username and age, and then we could just save it into our database, and then we'll be successfully be able to add it into that database via post requests. And of course, the second last one would be delete one. Very straightforward. You delete it. There's a built-in function called find by ID and delete. So you delete by the MongoDB ID, and then you could basically just show a success message if it's successful, or an error if it is not successful. And of course, last but not least is the update one. So as a put request, you would be essentially updating an existing user in the database, existing piece of data in the database. So what we have to do here is we have to, of course, establish that it is a put request by putting .put.http verb specifically there. We put the route. Specifically, we want the /ID. We want them to specify a specific user ID based on the MongoDB ID, so we can delete specific user. Update a specific user. And then we would have to define the body, basically the request body, which is the body of. So of course, we mentioned again, we have this body here. So for put requests, whenever we want to update something, or for post requests, we have to send them something to put in the database. So you need to put this JSON object and fill it in accordingly based off our schema with this correct, everything filled out, well, most of it filled out. And then we would put all of this user object and save it into our database. In this case, we're updating. So we have a method called find by ID and update. We update the user with this new one and replace the old data with this new user object. And then now that puts us back with API testing. Cool. So that was a quick rundown. So of course, if you're behind, make sure that you check out that resource. Otherwise, let's head directly into testing. Yay. In this case, our server should be working now, because we successfully filled out all the pieces of code here. So if I just expand the terminal, you can see that it says MongoDB success. So we don't have this chain of errors anymore. So that's perfect. So now we know that our server is running. We know that our users.js is complete. We know that everything else is complete as well. So all that's left to do is to test that everything works accordingly. And we do that by using Postman or Insomnia. Postman is more complicated, so we decided to use Insomnia for this workshop. So first things first, make sure that you're running the backend. If your server is not running, then of course you will not get anything, no response in your test client. So therefore, to quick review, if you don't want to run the server, Control-C if you're on Windows. The other one, just like up arrow C if you're on Mac. To exit, otherwise make sure that you're in the backend folder. You can CD to get to the folder that you want, CD like backend or whatever. And then to run it, you do nomon server. And you will have two success messages, of course. You have the server and you'll have the MongoDB success message. So cool, now that my server is running, we can directly go and work on these and test these routes. So let's do one test for now. So one of our tests is basically, we want to test that. Okay, so I guess let's just go over how to even work this Insomnia thing. So what is Insomnia? So Insomnia is basically, after you install it, you can create a new post request using JSON. So like if you want a new request, just do like Control-N and then just name this. It doesn't matter. I can name it like workshop. And then you could do like get whatever, doesn't matter. And you just create it. Cool, you have this empty like get request thing. And then here you would basically put in your URL, what type you want. I think I missed something actually. This should be JSON. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's try again. So we do Control-N, we enter a name, and then you're supposed to select post first. Sorry, my bad. So like you're supposed to do post, and then you would choose JSON. There we go. Yeah, okay. Now you have basically the same thing as I do. We want this JSON so that we can like do like JSON specific objects. So I will go back to here. So the first thing we want to try is adding something specifically to the database. So how do you add to the database? So you would first go do a put request. You would do localhost 5000/users, and then you would do /add. So it would be a put request because you're putting something, no, it'll be a post request because you're putting something new into the server. And then make sure that you have your JSON. So you can probably copy paste from a slide if you're bored. Make sure you change that 1003 to something else. Just add like a string, like your name or something, and put like 1, 2, 3 on behind it or something, so that if you're using dummy server, it will you're only allowed like a unique ID for each one. So like if they're the same name and the same request, might be an issue. So make your username a bit more unique. So I'll just add a few more letters here, and then the age doesn't matter. And then of course, when you're ready, you just click send. And yay, you have a success message, user added. So let's check if we actually got this test user 0123, whatever. I should actually change this. Let me actually make one more push request and make it a more obvious username so I don't have to search it up. So I would do nwPlus workshop user as our username, and will be 100 and will be 1,100 years old. 1,121 years old. And then we just send it. So we add a user. And now you would have an error message or you have a user added, depending on if it works or not. 200 means it's okay. So that's 200. So the request has succeeded. So how do I check this? If we look at our database again, I mean our API/user.js routes, how do I check that I have it working? So we would do a GET request. The simplest way is just to do a get all request. So just do the HTTP localhost 5000/users and then set the request to all. So I'm just going to copy paste this line because I am lazy to type it out. I could have just deleted that, the appended add, but I copy pasted it already. So whatever. And then I could just do a .get. And then cool. Now I have this whole chain of like database items. So let's see if we could find our specific user. So oh, I found like someone plays League here, which that's cool. But yeah, so nwPlus workshop user, we got added that like timestamp specifically. We have everything there. Cool. So we have confirmed that we have added that our get all route is working. We confirmed that our post route is working. So now let's confirm the other ones. So let's try the other routes. So specifically, let's look at our route list. We don't need this because that's just the alternative get request. So now let's try, we did a get one. We did not get one yet. So let's try a get one request. So we're getting a specific user ID. So if you do the get all request, you will be able to look at all these user IDs. So this time, I guess someone made Leeson. So I'm going to go find Leeson. And then I am going to go get that request specifically. So I go get HTTP localhost 5000 users, and then do /ID. And then I just do a send. And it should give me specifically that only that one user. So I send it. There we go. We only have the information from that one user. So get one is indeed working. So now let's try another one. So we did post one already. So now we want to do delete one. So I guess I will delete the user that we created today. So what we have to do is, of course, we have to see all the users again to see the user ID that we want to delete. We don't want to delete Leeson today. So let's delete our workshop. So nwPlus workshop user, we will delete it. So set your get request to a delete request. And then make sure that it is the same URL. So the same specifically request, same request URL. So HTTP localhost 5000/users/ID. So the ID is our nwPlus user. And then we can delete it. And then we have a success message. And then we can go do another get request, get all requests, and see if it has indeed been deleted. So if we just check our server again, I mean our database again, I don't see it anymore. So it's gone. I don't see nwPlus workshop anywhere, workshop user. So we have confirmed that this route is also working. Great. So now last but not least, let's try update. So let's go again and create our nwPlus user again. So we'll do a .add again, a post request, and do an add route. and then we'll create the same user so we can just update it. So there we go, we have the user added. And then we could just use users. We could check that it indeed got added. So with this get request, get all user. There we go. We do have it indeed, and now we want to update. So to update, we will use a put request. So a put request would be like this. So users, and then we want to update a specific user. So we will be updating our nwPlus user here. And then what do we want to update? So I'm going to go update it with nwPlus user number 2. So that we can see that the changes are reflected. I will make this person 50 years old. And then we will go ahead and send the request. And then there we go. So we have something successfully updated. And then of course we want to check our database to make sure that it is the only thing that's updated. So we can just do another get all request. And then we can check it. And yep, we only have that one user. So this means that we have been successfully able to do all the CRUD operations. And then that means that if we want to expose these routes outside to like anybody else that wants to use our database, then they could just literally access our routes and get that data. So like if I go to my local host in my browser, I would actually be able to get all this data. So let me just go to the slides. If I see, you can get all the data. So this is actually like what usually like, this is why like APIs are so useful, because if someone else wants to access your data, you can just like give them your pinpoint, and then you can just get all the data. So you've probably seen like stuff before like this, like some kind of core search, UBC grades or something. They all have APIs already for you to like use, and most of them have exposed their endpoints, so you can build off them. So yeah, so now we have, so if you ever want to like make an API, you pretty much just create an API, a very basic API that interacts with your MongoDB database. And of course, you should probably write some documentation so that's a little bit better and easier to use. And yeah, like pretty much ready to go. And let's go to the slides real quickly. And actually, let's go to the actual database and confirm that we have everything. So of course, we have a database here. We just refresh it. Then we can find our newly added items in our database once this is ready. Taking a little bit, it's a little bit slower today, but no problems. Okay, so there we go. We have our nwPlus workshop here too. So we have successfully gotten the most updated version of our database here as well. So let's just quickly go back to our user routes. And of course, here it is. We basically did this already. We want to check if everything is added. So always use the get requests, get all requests to check everything is added. There is definitely a way to also like root users as well. But it depends on how you want to specifically. You just have to reformat your route a little bit, because our routes specifically only do a single user for now, but you can definitely code up a route that will do multiple. And then, yeah, so that's basically it for the workshop. And then like, if you have any like questions, here are some good resources that I found pretty helpful. The first one is an exercise tracker. It basically creates their own API. It uses a React front end, so you can see how it interacts with the front end too. So that's a pretty good resource. You should definitely check it out. And then you can pretty much find the rest of them on Google as well, which is Express, running guides, HTTP request methods. Of course, feel free to reach out and connect if you would like to. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in Slack, or ask me now, or ask me later. Doesn't matter. Yeah, so we actually we finished like pretty much an hour and 30 minutes today. Solid 2 hours if we're including the 30-minute pre-workshop. I hope that you have found this relatively informative. And of course, like if you had this, this workshop will be available on YouTube and uploaded on the nwPlus Slack channel, nwPlus YouTube channel. And so will all the Notion notes. They will all be accessible, so you can reference them anytime. And of course, if I was too fast, if you want to roast me, feel free to drop some feedback, constructive criticism inside this feedback form, and that would be really appreciated because yeah, we'll use those for our future workshops and enhance the experience, hopefully from those comments.